Welcome to another edition of Trunk and Tales as we navigate what is happening in the world of national politics. I'm Stacy Smith, and if you're watching or listening to this podcast, I ask that you hit the like or the subscribe button. The Democratic candidate for Senate in the state of Maine has dropped out of the race over accusations of sexual improprieties. That has led to questions as to how he became a candidate in the first place. We've heard a lot about the rise of Democratic Socialist candidates, but how strong is that movement nationwide? For Republicans, they're facing questions about the war with Iran and higher prices. Are those issues enough to tip the scales for the Democrats in the fall election? And it's estimated more than $10 billion will be spent nationwide on all the races in the fall election. My panel of political analysts will have their opinions coming up in this edition of Trunk and Tales. And with me to talk about this is my panel of political analysts and experts, and they are former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett is the last Republican to be elected governor in Pennsylvania. He also served as the state attorney general and also as the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Governor Corbett teaches law at Duquesne University. Joining me on the Democratic side is the Pennsylvania State Democratic Party chairman, Eugene DePasquale. Mr. DePasquale also served as the Auditor General for Pennsylvania, holding that office for 8 years. And prior to that, he was elected to the state legislature. He now teaches law he teaches at Pitt and at York College. Keith Schmidt was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum. Keith also consulted on Santorum's 2012 presidential bid, and he now has his own consulting firm. And Joe Mystic. Joe's background includes consulting Democrats across the state and serving in city government. Joe teaches law at Duquesne University, and you can read his thoughts on life and politics in the Tribune Review. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us in this mid-summer time in hot July. But as we edge closer to the November election, there are a lot of issues on the table to discuss, so let's take a couple of those issues off the table and hear what you have to say about them. I will start with the Democrats because they seem to be capturing more headlines recently, and I will begin with the issue of Graham Plattner in Maine. He's a member of the populist or left wing of the party and surprised and annoyed the established Democratic leadership by winning the nomination to run for the Senate in November against the Republican incumbent Susan Collins. That is a contest that the Democrats believe they have a chance of winning. But as he tried to make his way to Washington, he left behind a trail of accusations of sexual improprieties, among other things. And that has led to calls for him to withdraw from the race, which he did on Wednesday night. Now, some in the party are questioning whether the National Party should now spend the money that it had earmarked for Maine on other races across the country. So, Eugene, I will come to you first. I'm going to give you a softball like this. I'm going to guess that you are thankful you are not the chair of the Democratic Party in Maine right now.
It's not that if people aren't asking me questions from national media is what will we do if that happened, because let me start off with this. He should drop out. There's no room for sexual assault. Hopefully we win the seat, but even if we don't, being a U.S. Senator has to mean something. And having someone like this in the U.S. Senate, as much as I'd like to have the vote to hold Trump in check and all that stuff, and what part of a guy having a Nazi tattoo, when we found that out about a year ago, are we now surprised that, he made other bad decisions in life? So to me, I didn't know he was going to break into some woman's home and sexually assault her, at least allegedly. But he's got to drop off, and
which he did last night.
Yeah, and the Democrats should. Yeah, I saw that. The Democrats should find a good, solid replacement, and the race should be competitive, and the party should invest in that because it is a blue-leaning state. Although Collins is tough to beat, but no matter how it shakes out, Graham Plattner should not be a United States senator.
To the point that he was poorly vetted by the Democrat Party. And I was surprised by that, because if you're going to go after a sitting senator, you want to go up with your best candidate. And for this person to have this kind of background. But what drives that, or what drove it, is I go back to all of this with my cell phone and social media. And he gained a following that some very serious senior senators, Bernie Sanders being one, came out and endorsed him without investigating or having somebody investigate him. That was the major fumble that I see has occurred in Maine, and I'm sure the Democratic Party is saying we can't allow a second fumble like that to happen, not only in who they pick here, but there's other races around the country that this type of act could occur.
I think that race was always going to be about whether Senator Collins has lost Maine more than anything else. And, Democrats have taken a few credible shots at her. They've not been able to pull off a victory. The irony, of course, is not lost on anyone here. This is a choice in many ways between a Democratic senator, this Graham Plattner at one point, and Donald Trump in his agenda. And when you put those two things into balance, in Donald Trump, you actually have the leader of our nation who's been found liable for some of the things of which Plattner's been accused of doing. But it's a chance for Democrats to distinguish themselves. This is something we will not tolerate within our party. And so, there's still some opportunity here.
Well, I agree with all my esteemed colleagues. There's a zero tolerance. He made the right decision. But there is a twist in my mind here. I mean, part of the problem in this cycle for Democrats is there's a notable difference between winning primaries and winning general elections. And for all the victories that they're building up with progressives in primaries, we're embracing that because we think that those people would be a little easier to beat in the fall. So in this case, for good reason, he's gone. But there's actually, in my mind, an opportunity for the Democrats right now. If they pick a solid candidate that isn't way out to the left here, and they market him correctly with the money they want because they think this is a swing state, they might be better served with the new candidate than the one they were strapped with because of the progressive movement. So I would not count on the money leaving Maine. I think we're going to have to wait for the next, I think they have 2 weeks. Let's see who they find, and it could be our worst nightmare. It could be actually someone who's in a better position because, quite frankly, up to these allegations, looking at his background and whatnot, I thought he's beatable. So we had he had to get out for the right reasons, but it's an interesting twist.
He was polarizing. You're right.
Well, here's my point with your statement there, Keith, and that is that he won on being a progressive. So the state Democratic Party, if they want to win, he defeated.
But now he has to face off against Democrats and Republicans, Stacey. It's a different election now. Now it's a general election.
Oh, I know, but I thought you were saying that if the Democrats wanted to win, they could go with somebody who wasn't as progressive.
Right.
Well,
I 100%.
Well, if that's the case, he was able to bring out a lot of progressive support in that state. Don't they run the chance of losing that support then in the general election?
Progressives have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to go. They're not going to vote Republican.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'd find someone closer to the middle, in my opinion.
All right. Well, let me ask you this on this same area, and this goes to each one of you are veterans in this field. He was able to secure this nomination. I think the governor pointed this out, that he was probably not properly vetted. The two guys who really helped him this campaign get going, one is an ad guy from New York City, and the other is a former member of the Bernie Sanders staff. And they basically said that people don't want the established Democratic Party candidate anymore. They want someone who's real and who they can relate to. So, as are the parties losing control?
Particularly on that point, I think it's a false choice. You can be real and be, sort of in the middle as well. I mean, I think very few people. I think Bill Clinton was a center-left Democrat and was very real and relatable. So I think that's, and I'm not picking on you. I think when people say that, I think it's a false choice. But on this thing of background check, I know we've all been a part of that in some way. The first time I ran, we did a background check. And when I say I paid for it, meaning the campaign paid for it, we knew, and my team, who was younger, come to me with this photo. So we have questions about this photo of you. I said, and it was a picture of me when I was 6, my younger brother who was 5, on Halloween. They go, well, what's the question? My brother was the Cowardly Lion, and I was Charlie Chaplin. my Uncle Alfred was a huge Charlie Chaplin fan. He was one of my idols growing up. Well, if you didn't know who Charlie Chaplin was, you thought it was Adolf Hitler. And so my point is, my team was so thorough in the background check that they found a Halloween picture of me, which, by the way, that was their job. I wasn't upset about that, of me dressed as Charlie Chaplin, and they didn't know who he was, so they thought it was Adolf Hitler. Now, I said, guys, he's the icon of silent movie comedy of all time, and then we all had a laugh about it. But my point is, candidates that are running for these high offices, they not only have a duty to their campaign, they have a duty to the public to know what is out there. And if you've done something that makes you unelectable, and you say you care about all of these issues, then you have a duty not to run, in my opinion. And I think anybody that wants to run for particular, I'm not talking about sort of a township supervisor, although those are important. If you want to be a United States Senator, member of Congress, a governor, a statewide row officer, a mayor, you have an obligation to the causes you care about to do your own background check. And if you don't, that means it's about ego. And I think that is a big problem. I think that was probably a problem with Plattner and a host of other people on both sides. They've got to want to know what's out there and then make that decision of whether they should even run. Knowing this stuff was out there, there's no way he should have run for office.
I don't
Okay.
think background checks these days move fast enough to keep up with social media. We have candidates that are defined by social media, and they're way down the road before a responsible traditional background check can catch up with them. And that's the problem here. They're defined by what's on social media. Oftentimes, that's just not related to reality.
But they're defined by what they put on social media, because that's how they went and got their people. So the candidate themselves, they know what they have done. Nobody may have found out about it. You can get into affairs and stuff like that. That's on the candidate. I don't know how some people would be able to find that out until somebody speaks up. And, I blame the candidate on this one.
I'm surprised it's the sloppy mess it is. I mean, in this age of technology, how is this happening? What aren't we figuring out? When I was more active in politics a generation ago, that was the role of parties. Parties paid that money. They actually gave us reports on various candidates. They spent the money to tell us why this person or that other person should or shouldn't run. I don't think as much of the money now is maybe being spent by parties. They're spending it on other things. Maybe that's part of the problem. Who's actually checking? Is the candidate? Is the local party? Is the national party? But there's no excuse for this happening. In the age we live in, where everything is at our fingertips. It's funny. Just a few days ago, when I was at coffee at our favorite place at La Prima, one of the conversations turned to Bernie Madoff. Or is that the Wizard of Oz, the guy that stole the billions? Is that was his name, Bernie Madoff?
Yep.
They said,
Bernie Madoff.
how is it that for 20 years no one checked? No one checked not one investor checked on a stock. None of the regulating authorities ever checked or double checked what he was doing. If anybody would have checked, they'd have found out. But we just let it go, and it's another example of it's there for the taking. There has to be. I can tell you one thing. Maybe what will change now is it'll go back to when I was younger, and they're going to have an established order of who's doing this, who does the background check, who reads it, who makes forms these type of advice and counsel for the party. Because as he said, I mean, what was it, a year ago we found out about that tattoo? I mean, my goodness, if that didn't foreshadow a Nazi tattoo, if that wasn't foreshadowing enough, I mean,
Well,
shame on you.
Let's just
I
say
think
everything
there's something else going on here. I think that we're old timers, guys. Let's face it. The standards we tried to live by are long gone. I think candidates are emboldened to run who otherwise in our day would not have given a second thought to running, not a first thought to running, because of things in their past or even in their current situation. Any single scandal in the Trump White House would have been enough to drive most people out of office or keep them from running. And you have a variety to pick from. for goodness sake, and he manages to weather it, and I think that emboldens candidates. People say, well, what's the difference? If he can run and win and run the country, I can run.
Well, let's go.
I think there are changed standards out there that we're living by.
Well, let's go back, though. We can go back to the presidential campaign of, I believe it was 1992, and before Bill Clinton was elected president. You had the potential scandals of him involving women in Arkansas, and Hillary Clinton going on 60 minutes, right, and saying that I'm not a stand by your man woman or whatever.
Nothing like this, though. Nothing.
No, Joe. My point is, I'm not comparing one or the other. I'm saying that this started to come in, I think, more of a relevancy in 1992, and the American people accepted it.
I don't know if John F. Kennedy could,
Oh, my heavens.
John F. Kennedy.
Sure.
What standard would we hold him to today if we knew everything then that we know now? You know what I mean? It's just standards have changed. I think people figure out.
To your point, Joe,
going to run, and that's it.
To your point of us being old-fashioned, because I was on this race 6 years ago. I actually remember when Reagan being a divorcee was a potential issue that we talked about.
Yeah.
Like, could a man who was divorced actually be elected president? And that was a real conversation. We overcame it, but my God, can you imagine that today? I mean, that wouldn't even, you could be married 4 times. Nobody would care.
Yeah.
All right, we've gotten kind of off track of where I wanted to go with this, but as I mentioned, Graham Plattner is from what we'll call the populist side of the party, but some try to link him with the Democratic Socialist Movement. Excuse me, I'm not quite sure that that can be done, but recent primary victories in New York and Colorado saw incumbents lose to Democratic Socialist candidates, and the co-chair of the Socialist Democrats is quoted as saying to the Democratic Party after the Colorado victory, quote, "We told you, bro. We effing warned you about the strength of the movement nationwide of the Socialist Democratic Party." Joe, you've been around for a while. You say that we're all on the older side. What's going on here? Is this a fraction within the party now? Is it factoring out?
Well, New York City and Colorado are not America. To the extent that there are progressive movements that are effective in certain localities, especially in primary races, be they progressive or retrogressive. The Republicans have their own problems, of course, with MAGA. That doesn't necessarily represent the nation. I just have a sense that Democrats and Republicans are, on the whole, moving towards the center. On the whole. There will still be these isolated areas where the Democratic Socialist message carries or the MAGA message carries. But I think the nation's trying to move forward from that, from both extremes. And that won't be easily done, and it won't be quickly done, but I think that's where we're headed.
Well, that raises a very good point. Go ahead, Governor.
It's a pendulum swing, and I talk about it all the time. We go from one, not extreme, but close to extreme, to another, if you look at history in the long view. Right now, we have, I consider it to be at least 4, if not 5 parties in the country. The far left, the far right, the middle left, and then independents in between. That independent group continues to grow. There's well over 1 million independents in Pennsylvania right now. I've advised, and I keep talking to people, I believe that independents in Pennsylvania should have the right to vote in the primary. They've left their parties or didn't want to be involved in party, but they should have the ability to help pick the candidate for November. And not this stuff that I see in, I think it's Georgia with ranked voting and all that stuff, and California Republicans don't have a chance because the top 2 people win and they're always Democrats. It would be when a independent came into the voting booth, he or she says, I want to vote Republican or I want to vote Democrat. Gets that ballot. That's good for that day. Next year, the next primary, they want to vote the other way, they can vote the other way. that would, the people that have left the parties and gone to the middle, or who are having a difficult time with what they're doing, I think it might bring the whole country back to the center a little bit. We're never on center all the time. It's always swinging back and forth. And
Eugene,
I
you
think
gonna
I've
take
convinced
this?
Joe about this.
Yeah,
We've had this
I'm
discussion
on
over
board with
years.
the governor on independents voting in the primaries. Let them drive both parties towards the center because you're going to have to appeal to them. I think they're the fastest growing political party in Pennsylvania, and
Yeah.
they're a party.
It's actually statistically, it's not even close. I actually introduced that bill when I was a legislator. It was actually before the governor became the governor, when he was the attorney general. I was in my second or third term in the state house. I introduced that bill. Look, I think primaries are paid for by taxpayers, so all voters should have a greater say in it. That, you know, if you want to have a party caucus or a convention, that's a different story. That should be for the party members. But I think a primary, they should have to declare that day which one they're doing. They shouldn't be able to vote Republican governor, Democrat, U.S. Senate, but they should have to pick one and do it, like the governor said. But I believe they should do it. But I think what you're seeing in, particularly in these deeper blue areas, but you're seeing in other areas across the country, I think it is registered Democrats, some of them even being moderate Democrats, expressing their frustration that they don't believe Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are fighting hard enough back against Trump. I think it's a revolt against that. And similar to, I think, when you had the Tea Party movement against President Obama, I think it was people feeling that, and I think the Governor Corbett, even though he was an incredibly popular attorney general and won an overwhelming general election, I remember that primary that he had. He had to be worried about sort of the far right in that primary because they were ascendant at that moment. Now, he overcame that and obviously won the general election convincingly. But my point is, this is whenever the party leaders are perceived as not fighting hard enough against a president, particularly the president, who the average party member, meaning I'm thinking about my mom as Normie Democrat, thinks Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries aren't fighting hard enough, it makes that type of voter more like, because it's not, progressives alone are not enough to win these primaries. They have to get some middle of the road Democrats to do it. And I think it's because they perceive as Jeffries and Schumer as not being good at their jobs.
Well, the progressive movement, has certainly caught on in the media. I mean, we're talking about it. As Joe pointed out, some of their biggest successes are in deeply blue areas, maybe not indicative of America, but we're gonna paint a broad brush on this. We're gonna talk about them coming to their state capitals into Washington, and they're gonna have an effect on legislation, and we're gonna there'll be some fear mongering there, if you really want a progressive. But I have to give them their due also. I have come to know a couple progressives and understand that there is there is a national movement of educating candidates and how they go about understanding that the real opportunities are in low turnout primaries, and they understand that and what I've learned is, talk about old-fashioned politics. They're not as married to television and radio and billboards and mail. They're touch points. They knock on doors. They register people. They get people out to vote. It's grassroots, which most firms can't mark up, so they top grassroots. They are a grassroots engine in an age when no one's doing grassroots, and that alone in a low turnout can transform an election. And that's why I think they're having the success they've been having.
Well, it's not only the Democrats facing some uncertainties, Republicans do as well. Maybe I'll just call this segment the Republican Party and President Trump. The president continues to wield power within the party when it comes to primaries, but he also has faced opposition over his agenda in the United States Senate. So will the real opposition come in the November election, not with the Senate, but with voters over certain issues? Those issues including the war, prices at home, and the money the president has made while he is in office. Governor.
If I was able to predict what's going to happen, I'd start picking a lot of numbers sooner rather than later. This president has had the ability to take all this criticism, but still remain popular within his core group. And you keep your core group, you have the momentum to go forward. He's gonna have to fight whoever the opposition is. His most important thing is to try and keep the Senate and the House. He loses the Senate and the House, or even either one of them. His agenda, in my opinion, is probably stalled for the rest of his term in office, and it'll probably absolutely drive him nuts to not be able to get things done. It drives me crazy to see what's going on in Washington, and they aren't getting things done that they should be, because he has a personal feeling against one person or one issue, and that has stopped the progress of Congress getting things done. And there's other topics we can get onto, but I'm going to share the screen with everybody else.
Well, I'm obviously no fan, and I never have been, and I miss my Republican friends deeply, traditional Republicans who were open to debate of the great issues of our times. We just don't have that anymore, and it's not just the Republicans' fault; it's the Democrats' fault as well. So, I sense that the country's just about had it with this guy, but he has a long stretch left in the White House, and he can do a lot of damage. Much will turn on these midterm elections. If Democrats can at least hold him in check for the final 2 years, that will be progress. He's a remarkable politician. We've never seen the likes of him, of course, and may never see the likes of him again. As Keith pointed out, he's managed to hold on to his core believers. Maybe the governor said that. But I have a sense we're closing in on the end of this. But it's not going to be without a struggle and without certainly some frightening times.
He's an individual that believes in loyalty, but it's one way. It's one way. And he punishes it if he doesn't see the loyalty. Yeah. The problem for most elected officials out there of the Republican Party is he has the money, and we're not even talking about the new $2 billion or whatever it is from crypto. He has the money to back up what he wants to do if he wants to see a different candidate replace a sitting senator or a sitting congressman. That's what's handcuffed the legislature, the Congress, as far as I'm concerned.
I've never been a fan of the
I can't hear you, Eugene.
What, can't hear me? My
Now we
audio
can.
not working?
I can't now. He was
okay.
in and out. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm obviously not a fan of Trump, but similar to what the governor said, his biggest Achilles heel is that he only cares about himself. That's my opinion. He only cares about himself. And so, but he was able to get away with it with a big chunk of the country because the economy was okay. In his first term, until COVID, the economy was fine. And there's no big insight from me. When the economy's good, incumbent presidents sort of get some leeway on some other stuff. Now that prices are higher and people are perceiving the economy not good, and for many it's not good, now a lot of his faults are getting exposed. And yes, he still has his base, and particularly to the governor, that money in that base means he's still lethal in a primary. But the middle part of the country now, I think, has perhaps permanently, but at least for right now, has turned against him.
Well, it's a second term, midterm. So it's just, I'm having a hard time wrapping my arms around what you sent us in our preparation. You always send us some things to read, and you sent us the Cook Report. So I read the Cook Report, and I'm thinking, I'm glad we have 4 more months, because the Strait of Hormuz, the Iran thing has to be cleaned up. Affordability has to be real in the grocery store and in gas pumps. None of that is real right now. But knowing that it's not real right now, you sent us a Cook Report, which again is a report, but I would say it's highly respected and has been pretty accurate in my lifetime in politics. And that report said, solid or leaning in the House, the Republicans have 212 seats and 18 are toss-ups still. And in the Senate, solid or leaning 49 with 4 toss-ups. Well, let me tell you, a second term, midterm with that report, with where things are right now, that's shocking to me. I mean, we've lived through a number of Democratic and Republican revolutions during midterms where the party can lose 50, 60, 70 seats. I mean, this is just amazing to me. If it's anywhere close to being accurate, this fall could be a lot more competitive than I thought it would be. I've always believed they're not going to take the Senate, especially with the vice president. We go down to 50. I think they're not going to get the Senate this time. But I had all but basically surrendered the House. But now I can tell you after we do this podcast, I'm going to start digging into some of the numbers and other reports and other talks because if we're solid or leaning 212 and 18 toss-ups, that's an amazing based on what's happening right now in America and in this administration.
But the key would be on the swinging of the House, the 14 House seats that are up currently, 14 are held. I'm sorry, 18 seats are up for grabs that are considered toss-ups, and of those 18, 14 are held by the GOP. They can't hold on to all of them, I don't think, or will they be able to hold on enough to keep control of the House?
This is not just to push back on Keith's point, because I think his overall point is correct. These districts have been so gerrymandered across the board that I think the day of 50 seat swings are all, I mean, you would have to have something equivalent to Watergate to even come close to that anymore, just because I think too many seats are just safe for one party or the other. I think you're only going to have, at most, across the board, 25, 30 seat swings either way anymore, and that's on the outlier because I just think these map drawers have gotten so precise and effective at drawing these maps that I just think having these massive waves that you used to see, I just think they're gone. I could be wrong, but I think these maps are too one-sided for too many parties to have those type of swings anymore.
Eugene, I'm going to ask you this question, that we don't have a Senate race in Pennsylvania this year, but you do have all of the congressional seats up for grabs. Yeah. At this point in the campaign, where are the Democratic congressional candidates focusing? Are they focusing on the economy? Are they focusing on just President Trump? What are they focusing on?
So there is clearly 4 main races right now. When I say Maine, not the state of Maine, but big races that are in the eastern part of the state. That's where all 4 of the targeted races right now. And I think there's 2 focuses. One is on critiques about Trump, and the other is what to do about prices and how to bring the prices down and get the economy moving. And I think that's where right now we have the edge in at least 3 of those 4 races. Now, as Keith has pointed out rightfully, we're at the beginning of this campaign, so there's a long time to go. But I think the party across the country in these key swing districts that win the battle of who's going to be better at handling prices in the economy are going to win the vast majority of these races. I don't think it's just going to be about who bashes who over the head most. I think it's got to be who wins the battle about which ones do I trust to bring prices down more.
All right. I don't have my notes in front of me here, but if I recall reading the Cook Political Report, that of those 18 seats that considered up for grabs, toss-ups, 3 of them are in Pennsylvania, which is kind of surprising, too.
We're one of the few states that hasn't redrawn the map, so that's part of my point, which is, we didn't do that because we have a divided legislature. So and I'm not saying that as a criticism that they didn't draw the maps, but that a lot of these other races that used to have swing districts, they're not swing anymore because they redrew the maps.
And 2 of those Republicans, this is their first term.
Yeah, right.
So if you're going to get a sitting congressman, that's to get them up to the first term, because once they get established in there with 2 or 3 or 4 terms, it gets a little harder.
Okay. Let's move on to one final subject here, and that is money. It's estimated $3.4 billion will be spent on Senate races this fall across the country, and another $2 billion on House races. And then, according to these estimates, you can add in $5.4 billion on gubernatorial and down-ballot races across the country. So all of that money, more than $10 billion, before the Supreme Court's decision striking down limits on party spending. Where are we going with this, with all this money being spent?
I don't know.
Going with the rest of cars. It will continue on. I don't see it changing. You would think technology and what they're doing with technology would make it a little bit less expensive, but they pour more money into the technology. I think nothing's going to change, and it will increase. And people are going who have the personal wealth to do it are going to continue to invest in their candidate.
Yeah, I think Obama was right when he said that Citizens United was going to prove to be a disaster for our electoral process. And it's after that, I mean, throw off all the restraints, and it's only gotten worse. Now I'm at the point where I've given up on any notion that we can control campaign spending. I'm focusing on reporting. We can have real-time reporting as to who is given what to whom. I want to know whose pocket you're in before I vote. I want to know who's funding you, who's supporting you, because I think the horse has left the barn on terms of how much you can spend and who can contribute to whom. I want accurate reporting, and I want it in real time. When you give a contribution or you spend money for a candidate, I want it on a website the very next morning. I want to be able to see who's supporting you and where you're likely to go.
I think Joe is spot on. This Supreme Court is not going to tolerate limits, and they're going to be that coalition will at least be in charge for another 10 years. It is not a free speech issue to disclose who is donating them. It is not a limit on speech. That is, first of all, I'm against the Citizens United case, but sometimes you got to deal with the reality of it.
Yeah.
Immediate disclosure. I mean, I would say, I think campaigns should have to immediately disclose any donor that's above $5,000 or $10,000. You've got to, any organization that gets somebody that's donating more than $10,000, the public has a right to know that, in my opinion, within 24 hours.
What's changed since I left 20 years ago is the amount of money that is being raised by political ad campaigns, that the politicos that run the campaigns, and lobbyists, because of the ones that run the campaign have their own fundraising arm, because they certainly want to raise money so they can buy ads and take 14%. I mean, they get it. I mean, they finally figured it out, and the amount of money of that pie that is coming from their ad people is unbelievable. And the amount of money coming from lobbyists in the last 20 years has more than doubled. They're the two fastest growing sectors of fundraising, because more and more people, small donors, are getting smaller. There's fewer people in their pockets anymore, or writing checks because they don't have an understanding what their state rep does or their state senator or whatnot, especially these legislative races in states. And they're almost being solely controlled by ad agencies and lobbyists at the state level. So it's very much a different, changing time. And as you said, Stacey, where's it going? I don't know. I don't know where the limit is. I think it's become an industry. We talked about it being an industry 20 years ago. It's completely its own economy now.
Stacy, the I guess conundrum is the best word I can come up with to this whole problem. Is the only way for it to be fixed, let's say instant reporting, which you could do next day reporting in the technology we have today. There's no reason that they couldn't do that. But all of that change resides at the Congress. They have to make the change. Are they willing to make it?
Yeah, it's like,
That's the problem.
Are you willing to put in, if you're a member of Congress, are you really willing to put in term limits? Are you really willing to
I believe in term limits. Exactly. I actually believe there should be an age limit running for office. Being the one who's over 75, I say 75.
That's why my old boss is working with Convention of the States. We'll talk about that on another show. But that's over term limits and other things that you can compel Congress to do things. But it's through a little-known part of the Constitution called the Conventions of the State part of the Constitution. And I would suggest that that's the only time that would ever see term limits or balanced budgets or whatnot. But again, I'll save that for another time.
Well, I'll wrap this up with this question, and that is that when you're talking about reporting and everything else, it's called dark money that comes in from these PACs. I presume there'd have to be some sort of legislation that I guess you can't outlaw the PAC, but you could force them to reveal who the donors are.
Yes, that legislatively could happen where you would get to know who's donating to those super PACs.
What's the likelihood of that ever happening?
In
That's
this
the
Congress,
conundrum.
Yeah, in this Congress, zero.
That's the conundrum
There's
you're
a lot of
talking about.
stories.
Zero.
He's right.
They're the same chances of me pitching tomorrow for the Pirates. Zero.
Yeah. And
If
Joe,
you're
I'm
a
sure,
reliever, we'll take you, sight unseen.
No
take it.
question. So you're saying there's a chance.
yeah. Joe, how much dark money came into Sophie Masloff's campaign?
I can't think of any. We'd have taken all we could get. You know, we were in a tough fight.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with me again for Drunken Tales. We'll continue our look at politics in our next episode. Again, if you're watching or listening to this particular podcast, I ask that you hit the like or the subscribe button on whatever platform you happen to use. But for now, thanks for joining us. We'll see you maybe in about a month or so for the next edition of Trunk and Tales.